This is my house.
I've been given some truly awful movies to watch lately, like Death Racers, and it appears I'm on somewhat of a purgatory arc. I've been handed what appears to be a DVD case in a brown paper bag, so let's see what it is this time. Ooh, John Carpenter's Ghosts of Mars. I'll just open that up and put the DVD in, and there appears to have been a mistake, because inside the DVD case is a copy of the Asylum movie Ice Spiders, starring Patrick Muldoon from Starship Troopers and the 7 Adventures of Sinbad. Yes, that Patrick Muldoon. And can you imagine how he must have felt when he had to do Ice Spiders, thinking, less than 10 years ago I was doing Starship Troopers with Paul Verhoeven, and now I'm in Ice Spiders by the Asylum, being directed by Tibor Takacs, who did Mansquito and Kraken Tentacles of the Deep. What the hell happened? And no, I refuse. I'm not watching Ice Spiders again. This is officially an uprising. What's the point? YouTube will probably tank my video anyway after they mishear a word and think I used profanity when I said the word P-O-S-S-E. Because that isn't okay on YouTube, it seems. Thumbnails like this are fine though, huh, YouTube? You can't say it, but you can press one against the camera lens for a thumbnail.
Those look good. A big salty clam would sure go great with this heat. You want one, Daff?
No.
Not right now, Fred. I'm frankly not in the mood, but I do need something to watch, so I'm going to do Ghosts of Mars instead. Ice Spiders must have been a mistake, both putting it in the wrong box and making it in the first place. So, John Carpenter's Ghosts of Mars. Before I watch this again, for maybe the 3rd or 4th time ever, I have an inkling of what's going to happen when I watch this, because it's happened a few times recently with other films. You see, I remember this being a bad movie, and my suspicion is that in re-watching it, I think I'm maybe going to change my mind because of what I've been watching lately and the quality or distinct lack of it in a lot of Hollywood's recent output. So why does the movie get such a bad rap? I think that part of it may be because it's coming from John Carpenter, and John Carpenter is a director who's made a lot of films that I love. He's up there with some of my favourite directors, and when I think of him, I think of Halloween. I think of Escape from New York, I think of Big Trouble in Little China, I think of The Thing. And those last two, for what they are kind of perfectly crafted for me. When I think of John Carpenter, I think of all of those movies where I wouldn't change a thing about them. I even have a soft spot for John Carpenter's Vampires. That's how far gone I am. I even made it through Vampires Los Muertos, and he was only a producer on that, and it starred John Bon Jovi and a very young Diego Luna. And then I remember the first time I watched John Carpenter's Ghosts of Mars, and I was expecting something of the quality of those films I mentioned, and it isn't. It really isn't. It isn't even close. Not only is it not in the ballpark of Escape from New York, it isn't even selling t-shirts in the car park. It's several miles down the road, passed out in a ditch. But my suspicion now is that even one of my least favourite John Carpenter films is going to look good when stacked up next to The Marvels. Or Madam Web, because in short, Madam Web was in the Amazon with my mum when she was researching spiders just before she died. And after having just watched Ghosts of Mars again, that's exactly what happened. There are flaws in the film, there are quite a few things I'd change, but the flaws pale in comparison to those in a film like Argylle. So what is Ghosts of Mars? For most of the film it's a horror that turns into more of an action movie as it goes along and contains a lot of science fiction elements. It has a bit of a packed cast, containing Natasha Henstridge, and it's that Species era Natasha Henstridge. It has Jason Statham, it has Ice Cube, it has Pam Grier who's in Foxy Brown, and the cast is kind of one of the problems with the film, because the movie leans a lot on Ice Cube, who in the movie is playing... well, he's playing Ice Cube. He kind of plays Ice Cube in every movie I see him in. Part of me thinks John Carpenter maybe gets a bit too much credit for his good films, because in retrospect, I wonder how much of his best work was down to Kurt Russell. Because I get the feeling that if Ice Cube had been the lead in Escape from New York instead of him, the film would have been a lot worse, and from here on, there will be spoilers. For me, the problems in the movie start right from the intro, where we have a voiceover doing the world setting which says, For weeks, rumours have spread across Mars, from outposts to settlements, from town to town. Something that had been buried for centuries has just been uncovered, and as this mysterious force moves across the southern valley, it leaves behind only silence and death. And although this is quite an efficient piece of world building because it takes very little time to do the world setting, I would have preferred it to be more organic and less like exposition, and for the film to be more like The Thing in introducing the threat. I would have preferred to find out about it as the characters did during the film, instead of during an exposition dump before the opening credits. It means I don't get to share the experience with the characters because I already know before they do what's going to be happening. In the film, a female survivor played by Henstridge has been found on a train, and almost the entire of the film is told in flashbacks as she's telling the story of what happened to her to the authorities. Out of 1 hour and 40 minutes of movie, maybe 5 to 10 minutes of it is not in flashbacks. Most of the movie is one long flashback that has smaller flashbacks nested in it, and I would have done none of that. Because the problem for me of having a long flashback told by a character is that it kind of gives the plot away, doesn't it? If you have Natasha Henstridge telling the story of what happened, then you know for the entire film that she's in no danger. So the structure of the film for me is kind of undermined by the choices that have been made. In the story, a load of police on Mars, including Henstridge and Statham, are being sent to pick up a notorious criminal, being played by Ice Cube from a remote mining area of terraformed Mars. He's accused of multiple homicides, and Statham is playing a complete sleazeball who's making unwanted lewd remarks to Henstridge throughout the film, and he's doing a very good job of acting it out. The worst part for me is that his advances kind of work. She actually goes for it. And these first few acts of the film are where the film works best for me. There's normality on the train journey to the mining settlement and some character development, and that gives way to horror as they go into the town and find a bloodbath waiting for them. And this kind of horror is the thing that John Carpenter does so well. The whole place is a slaughterhouse apart from some people they find safely locked in prison cells. They also find Ice Cube, and the group come under attack by some of the locals. The local people have gone feral and insane. As we learn later, miners had unearthed a site on Mars and released something ancient that wanted to destroy everything that was trespassing on its planet. It takes over the mind of people and turns them into feral monsters that can't be stopped. If they get put down, whatever is inside them can just take someone else over, and it seems to travel on the wind. We find that out when one of the people in the cells tells them how she was the lead scientist that unearthed the site, and we get a flashback in an already existing flashback. The main story is a flashback of Natasha Henstridge telling the authorities what happened, and within that flashback is the lead scientist telling Henstridge her story in a separate nested flashback. The film consistently has problems with character motivations. For some reason, the Doctor doesn't warn them about what she knows until they start to get picked off, and it doesn't make any sense for the character to do that. The commanding officer, played by Pam Grier, disappears in the meantime, and we only kind of get to know what happened to her by Natasha Henstridge telling a story of what Jason Statham told her he saw in yet another flashback. He saw one of the ferals putting her head on a spike and a whole load more of them at the mine preparing for battle. The people who they can't turn, they execute. All of the survivors then band together as the ferals put them under siege in the prison. And this is where the film gets a lot worse for me, because the characters all try to make a break for the train, which is supposed to arrive but doesn't, and Ice Cube then charges the entire group back into town and into a massive fight with the ferals that their group know they can't win. Even if they put the bad guys down, they already know that what is inside the bad guys can just jump into one of their group. The only sensible course of action for them would be to run away. If you can't fight them, you have to run, or at least have the film give a good reason why they can't run away. Maybe the film could have had their group surrounded and the only way for them to go was back into the town. That would have worked. If the characters had been better written, the logical choice for their group would have been to get into one of the vehicles that they've already seen in the film seems able to contain the ghosts, and then get out of there in that vehicle. The film established that the vehicles are bulletproof, and the ferals are throwing things and using melee weapons. You can be safe inside one of them. Instead, Ice Cube gets the group back into the prison, but by that point, They've lost maybe half of their group. There's a lot of fighting as they're under siege again and trapped in the prison, and action for me is just not really John Carpenter's strong suit. Even less so when it's to the calming tones of the band Anthrax, and the music, well, I would have maybe preferred if John Carpenter did the music because the Anthrax is a bit much for me. The train then finally arrives and the survivors get onto it, but instead of leaving, Henstridge has the bright idea that she's just determined to destroy the threat. So they go back into town again to set off the nuclear reactor, planning to blow up the bad guys and then leave on the train. They use the train as a thing to distract the bad guys with, so some of them can get into the power station, and while some people go inside, Henstridge just stands outside of it, right in the open, looking at the bad guys through binoculars. So the distraction doesn't work because they all notice that she's there. Again, this is not a good piece of writing for me, because it makes Henstridge's character look like a moron. And they could have got the same narrative result without doing that. Maybe have an alarm go off inside the power station when they try to overload it, and it's that attracts the bad guys, instead of Henstridge just being stupid. As it is, her standing in the open causes another battle which results in everyone getting deleted apart from Henstridge and Ice Cube. And all that to set off a nuclear reaction that they don't even know will destroy the threat anyway. Henstridge is left wounded on the train, where she eventually ends up back at the capital, telling the story to the authorities, and in the meantime, Ice Cube has escaped again. There's then a prologue of Ice Cube waking her up because the threat has now made it all the way to the capital and everything's gone to hell again. So John Carpenter's Ghosts of Mars. I think I've been judging it too harshly all this time, because for me now, even one of the weaker efforts of a master filmmaker like John Carpenter holds up well if you stand it next to Madam Web. The horror in it was very effective, the action made some serious missteps for me, but Madam Web only really had 3 action scenes in the whole film. In one, she ran away. In the second, she ran the bad guy over in a taxi and ran away. And in the third, she ran him over with an ambulance and then ran away. In contrast, at least Ghosts of Mars delivers some fairly good action, even if it's hardly a masterpiece.
Hurry, somebody call an ambulance, call 911. Don't worry, miss, they're gonna get help.
Please, we need an ambulance now. A woman has been stung on the beach.
What happened to her?
I don't know, something about a giant jumbo jellyfish.
Fuck. Jesus. Never rub another man's rhubarb.